In this episode of Podcast Tactics, you will get podcasting tips and advice from a dynamic duo who launched a show that inspires people to live a fulfilling lifestyle. If you want to keep learning about podcasting, get inspired, and stay motivated, join the mailing list at podcasttactics.com. I'm James, the host of Podcast Tactics. Thanks for listening. Let's get into it. Joining me at the mic are Fitz, DeSanto, and Sam Boyer from Sail Beach, California. Fitz and Sam, welcome to the show. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having us.
Happy to be here.
I'm excited to talk with you guys. You guys are in one of the genres that I feel very passionate about as well, but I'm not going to steal the show. This is about you guys. Please tell us what the name of your podcast is and what's it all about.
The name of our podcast is actually Enroute to Success. So Sam and I share the same passion on helping others through experiences in talented individuals that we bring into the actual podcast because we want to deliver positive light to our listeners that they can apply in their everyday lives. We can help one person. If we've helped one person in our podcast, then we've done our duty, right? So for me, the reason why our mantra is inspiring hearts one podcast at a time is because we want to inspire and reach as many people as we can through positive lights on our past experiences and our talented individuals that we bring into the podcast. And Sam, I'll let you dive in more to that if you'd like to add.
Absolutely. I would love to elaborate. So, and to give a little perspective too, this all stemmed from a lot of conversations that Fitz and I had prior to even starting the podcast. So, this goes back to just a connection on LinkedIn originally, to discussion back and forth, to phone calls, Zoom calls, and then understanding that we aligned on so many values. And those discussions are what really drove us toward thinking, well, if we're getting so much from our discussions back and forth, why should we not share that with other people? And then also, to extend on that, to Fitz's point, learn from others that we could bring into the show and gain and cultivate as we extract their knowledge, their insights. And I think it really boils down to the three pillars that are, in our tagline: people, development, and lifestyle. And those three things are so much of what Fitz and I's discussions were originally around. And that's where we wanted to lean into with a lot of the discussions, the topics, the people that we've interviewed so far and that we plan to interview. And it's just been a really fun journey so far.
So let's dive a little bit into that. Sam, I'm going to start with you. Where does that drive come from? That kind of drive to, want to be inspired and to want to inspire others?
Yeah, I love the question, James. And I will credit a lot of this to, I think my family, especially like my grandmother. She's been a huge part of my life for the majority of it. And I've just always seen how generous she is with other human beings. And so she was the reason that I was able to, along with my parents, play a sport, expensive like hockey. Ice hockey is what I grew up playing. And so I've always felt that there's ways to give back to people the way that she's provided for me, along with my family too. And so I think that stemmed into the personal development side of life and what I've learned and seeing how much impact can come from just a few conversations. So that drive for me has always been like, in the future, I want to be able to work with special needs kids, like my experience that I had volunteering in high school. And so I definitely want to, in the future, have a nonprofit that can support different goals that I have envisioned for how to help some of those individuals out. And so I think it's all culminated and come together in terms of what I'm learning from personal development and wanting to share that with others because I know how beneficial it's been for me.
And Fitz, how about you? Where does that come from for you?
Yeah, it's a little similar to how Sam is. I grew up in the Philippine Islands, so I've seen the poverty, and I grew up with my mom and my grandmother who spend our time really doing a lot of work for the poverty, poor kids, and also homeless people. So in a weekly basis, I grew up feeding the homeless shelters and these poor kids. And I see the value in helping and the invested generosity that you put in relates to helping others and how it makes you feel and how it comes back to you. And I've seen that through my whole entire life. Now that I am in the US, I can see that and I want to give back onto that. And on the professional side of it too, is that whenever I think of a teacher that I really like that actually believe in me, I wanted to be that type of model as well by listening with people just listening to our podcast. If we can make the same impact that believe and inspired after they hit stop, then me and Sam are happy people.
Absolutely. Tell me how did you guys get connected? You mentioned LinkedIn. Were you connected just through LinkedIn or were you colleagues? How did that happen?
Yeah, I'm in the business development and sales side, and I was actually targeting Sam's company that he works for. So in LinkedIn, and I'm the kind of person that I don't just sell you things. And we all know how that email happens in LinkedIn. And that's not my style. I actually like to get to know the person. So Sam and I kind of just went back and forth, and it kind of just grew from there organically. For how long have I known you, Sam? For what, like a couple of years, 2-3 years now at this point?
Yeah, it's been about at least 2 years now.
Yeah.
At this point.
So it just flourished from there. I don't know if you want to add more, Sam, to that.
Yeah, I think Fitz is actually, I always tease him. He's like the master networker and relationship builder. So this is all credit to him. I had just been active on LinkedIn. That was the only thing I did in terms of this. But Fitz reached out and we had a just really genuine discussion around like goals and what we wanted to do in life. And that's what led us down the route of like understanding we had so many similar values. And then we decided, hey, why don't we actually just connect on a Zoom call, set that up and have the discussion there. And then we just had a certain cadence around connecting. And honestly, I think both of us were just like, wow, like this is a good, like genuine friendship in a time where that was leading into the beginning of COVID when everything was shut down. And we were like, well, why not build friendship, in the modern way that we can? And it led to all the conversations around, oh, I've been kind of wanting to start a podcast. Oh, really? You too? Okay. And then one thing leads to another. And we decide to launch on Christmas Day of 2020.
Christmas Day.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's right. That's right. Very cool.
2020 on Christmas Day. Yes.
In terms of your podcast, let's circle back to that. What inspires, are there any podcasts that inspired you guys, or are you just kind of going in fresh, just kind of, I'm going in blank slate? How are you approaching the production of your podcast?
Yeah, sure. For me, I'm a huge podcast listener, and the way we approach it is that I pay really attention, not to just the interviewer, but also the guests and vice versa. But I love the podcast that we can take away something out of it. So in relates to how we can help others. So for me, I want to deliver the same feeling I get when I listen to my favorite podcast that I feel right after I stop, because now I'm reflecting. And so that's how I approach it. So every time Sam and I focus on an episode, we want to make sure that we focus first on our why and what the intention and what's the purpose of it and how we can deliver more light to others.
I've been listening to educational, personal development, entrepreneurship, business related podcasts since junior year of college, sophomore, junior year. So I've always been intrigued by the personal development side of things. And so I think I haven't really necessarily thought that we were basing it off of any of the formats of other podcasts, but I know one entertaining podcast I always appreciate is in the length of conversation that can happen is Joe Rogan Experience, and how he's able to be such a conversationalist. And I think that, our podcasts are nowhere near 3, 4, 5 hours long, but we've taken a similar approach to what it seems like you do too, James, is just have a good discussion with people. And I think that really brings out the authenticity, the genuineness. So I think I've just kind of taken everything that I've come across so far and thought, how do we put our own spin on it? And it just so happens that Fitz and I align on a lot of those things already. So we didn't have to really do too much back and forth about the formatting or how we go about the podcast.
So you guys launched December 2020, 2020, December 25th, 2020, which as of this recording is, I'm going to say 3 months ago. What kind of challenges have you encountered at the beginning of your launch, and how have you broken through them?
Yeah. I think we went in with blind eye, but also prepared at the same time. So we kind of found the balance of what we actually needed, like the basic stuff, like we both have our own mic that's the same. We kind of know the basic, but then I remember Sam and I on Christmas Day, we're in a working sessions for 2-3 hours, right? And we're just kind of figuring things out, like, how do we do this? How do we edit this thing? So you kind of and we have to remind ourselves that, hey, we're trying to figure things out, but we're going to get better as we get through it. And I could say that what we know back on December 25th to now have expanded so much that right now it's just we have our cadence in relates to would record a podcast, would edit, would upload, but then it kind of just went on through taking a risk and making sure that all those grounds are covered. And it always comes back to, hey, you know what? As long as our quality is good, we want our content out there because we want the people to listen to it.
I'll fast forward to kind of where we are now, something that's come up recently that is totally a blessing in its own way that we actually had a discussion about earlier, Fitz and I did, is keeping up with social media, and like the growth that started to occur is really just it's a skill of its own, how to be efficient and also build connections with people through social media. If you want to grow a community of listeners, and that alone has been a new experience for both of us. I was doing a lot personally on LinkedIn prior to us starting the podcast. And now we have several social media accounts to balance. And we were joking about looking at hiring an intern, maybe in the future, which would be a good problem to have. But that's been something that's come up recently. And more on, I guess, a personal level, I think something Fitz and I both talked about too was just getting past some of the potential judgment for like putting yourself out there. And I'm sure you've felt this too, James. I think a lot of people that do podcasts or even interviews feel this way, that if you're putting yourself out there, there's always that potential for judgment, or what are people going to say, or how, what feedback are you going to get? So getting past that has actually given me a lot of confidence in some intangible successes, I would say.
Oh, I'm glad you went there, Sam. That's the perfect segue. I was going to say, let's talk about successes. First of all, how do you define success for your podcast, and what have you achieved?
Yeah.
Go for it, Fitz.
It's so fascinating, and we feel very blessed and grateful every day. Sam and I, like this guy and I almost talks every day, because it's either an issue or, well, most of it is the accomplishments. Like, dude, look at this platform and what we've done. So as of today, as we speak, we have more than 700 downloads in 3 months.
Awesome.
And we're also ratings in Apple Podcasts for 4.9 out of 5 stars. And I promise we didn't pay anybody to do that. And also, we're number 23 in Ireland and Europe under self-development. So for us, that is it might not be a lot, but when we when we started the podcast, like Sam and I talked about it, what type of goal should we hit? Like, we had a number in our head for 5,000 downloads in 1 year, and we're already in 700. So for us, we feel very fortunate and blessed, and it really shows how people respond, and that it feels good to us that we're sharing the light that we intention.
Yeah, and it's funny, Fitz and I are usually on the same wavelength, so he shared the first couple points that I did have jotted down, which is great. So I'll talk on, I guess, more of a personal win for me is I really felt a huge spike in my communication skills and the confidence and to articulate and elaborate in ways that I probably couldn't have before. If you would have talked to me maybe 6 months ago, first of all, if I even had a mic at the time, I'd probably be, stuttering a little bit or fumbling over my words, or maybe, sweat that you do or do not see down the side of the face kind of thing. But I feel so much more confident and also it's helped in the professional space too, with everything, now being remote and facilitating meetings online, as well as communicating with people over messages and building relationships and interpersonal relationships in my life. I feel like I have more fun things and cool things going on to talk about. And I'm learning so much from this experience that everything feels fresh and energizing. So overall, it's just really improved those skills. And also I think the quality of just the gratitude and happiness in my life as well.
And Fitz, how about you? I'm curious about, like, on a personal level, how the podcast has functioned for you.
Thank you for asking that. For me, I'm the same way with Sam. I mean, if you see us recording on our first day, on Christmas Day, we were very nervous, and so I would vibe in with what just Sam said. With me in front of the camera and being in front of the microphone have improved, and the communication skills as well. I am bilingual, so for me to articulate and also elaborate what I meant is actually, I'm comfortable right in front of the camera. And also, I have to say personally, the podcasts keep us on our toes, because I'm a huge believer of practice what you preach. So if we're here, we have to be really true with ourselves, and awareness for me that I have to be true to my own self, because if I want to make sure to spread this light to the people, I have to actually practice what I preach. So it kind of goes both ways, right? For me personally, communication skills and being comfortable in front of a camera and light, and also it goes deeper than that, within me.
So I want to talk to you guys about how it is to co-host a podcast. I'm a solo podcaster, but I do interview. So, like, in a way, you guys are my co-hosts, or my guests are my co-hosts. But one-on-one, and I do want to talk about some of the episodes that I listened to. But before I get into that, just how are you guys finding it is to be co-hosting with each other? Is it, this is kind of a loaded question, because it's leading me into another question, or more of a statement that I have, but tell me, so let's start with you. How is it to co-host a show with Sam? Let's approach it from that direction.
Yeah, I would preface it with a lot of communication. Before we start the podcast, we have communication. Hey, do you want to host? And if I feel that Sam feels super strongly about our episode, that I could feel it through the screen, like, okay, like, this is his thing, So for me, I'm like, Sam, did you want to host? Or, and vice versa. I think Sam and I align with our values that we like to be generous. So it doesn't, which we're really blessed, because it doesn't affect our friendship in a way, who hosted and who didn't. In a way, it kind of flourished it more, because we had that open communication, like, hey, did you want to host this? Did you want to host that? And, and vice versa. I feel that, to be honest, sometimes I talk so much that Sam is like, okay, I'll wait, but he doesn't get offended. And, but in a way, it happens both ways, and I'm kind of just like, okay, I'm going to back off, because Sam is really passionate about this. So we kind of have that understanding. What do you think, Sam? Help me out here.
Yeah. This is what we do. We get to the end of a thought, and then the other person kind of picks it up. It works out well. I think mainly we have a lot of fun with it, and I took full real estate or royalties on the whole intro of the podcast. So I always feel like any episode that isn't a guest of mine personally, or a topic that, like Fitz said, that I'm super passionate about, I actually prefer personally for Fitz to host, because I'm a listener, and that's a skill that I've really worked on over the last couple of years. And so listening to Fitz talk or bring something up sparks more ideas in my mind than I actually had written down or prepared beforehand. So I really enjoy when he hosts, and then when I host, it's more on me to facilitate that discussion instead of listening as much. So it's two different skills, but I really enjoy both. I just think that, I like putting the pressure on Fitz to host a little bit, since I got all the intro.
So, that is the perfect segue into, and I've got to stop saying that. That is the perfect segue. That is the perfect segue into talking about a couple of episodes that I listened to. I listened to your first episode, the trailer. Well, what I'm calling the trailer. I think you guys actually called it episode 1. It was why are you guys doing a podcast? And I'm not going to set, and no spoilers here. I mean, you guys set up perfectly the listener for what's in store for your show, at least in terms of how you guys were envisioning it at that time. And then I listened to, it was not the most recent one. I actually listened to episode 14, Gratitude, just to kind of get, like a before and like what's going on right now. And the one thing that I really appreciate with your guys' energy is the camaraderie that you have. There is a level of synergy that you guys have with each other. You alluded to it just a moment ago, Sam, where you were like, or maybe Fitz said it, but you guys bounce off of each other very nicely, and it is almost like you guys are riding the same wave, and it's this almost perfect tandem of a conversation when it's the two of you guys. I haven't listened to one of your interview episodes yet, so I'm looking forward to doing that. But yeah, I mean, just in terms of this, so this is where my loaded question comes in, how was it to co-host? Because to me, what comes across is it's extremely natural. It seems like you guys get along very well. You guys are very communicative. Like I said, I didn't listen to any of your interview episodes yet, but I am curious about how you're approaching interview shows. First, how do you get guests, and how do you prepare for those?
Fitz, you should field this first, and then I'll echo, because Fitz, this is like almost his job in a way. So I'll let him start.
Yeah. So our main focus on our podcast, when we bring a guest in, our thought process is, what is this individual have gone through, and also the inspiration that have brought us in, that it's really worth getting into the podcast to bring value to our listeners. So a lot of times, really in my network, whenever somebody made an impact in my life, I want to make sure that they're not just making an impact in my life, but also I want to bring this platform of our podcast to actually just share their story. And if they're willing to, right? One of our episode comebacks with Kelly Curtis is a really good friend of mine. I was in fitness full-time before for a couple years, and I met her, and she came from drug addiction and alcoholism that is now owned and founded her own fitness studio. So that type of success, we want to see that light on how she was able to get out of that darkness and find that light. And I think that's so valuable to see the listeners. So how we approach it for the most part is that it always comes back to our intention and our purpose. And then from there, Sam and I have this power hour meeting, and we would be like, these are the questions we want. What else do we want to do? What else do we want to? And then Sam and I, a lot of communication back and forth. We would have a Zoom work sessions, and we would go back and forth and kind of just finalize. And of course, we didn't want it to be scripted, so we kind of unpack a lot of things like how you are doing it now as well, James. So Sam, I don't know if you want to allude more to it.
Definitely. No, everything you just shared was on point, and the thought process that we definitely keep is what value can we extract from this person and their specific journey that's going to help the most amount of people. So when Fitz has a really great friend, Jennifer, who, we interviewed about specifically anxiety, because she's in, the field of therapy, and it's a topic that came up that we were like, oh, how could we talk about this? And we have an expert on this specific topic that can share light on that. And so we kind of shift our target of what the conversation is going to be based on what that person has expertise in. So that way they're getting the chance to speak about something they're really knowledgeable on, they're most likely passionate on too. And we think that that's going to create the most impact. So that's kind of the focus on the conversation side. And then as far as, I guess, bringing guests onto the show, we're just starting with people we've built relationships with currently. And then we're also doing the networking on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, how we all met, and just bringing those conversations in organically. So that way it's a very friendly conversation, just like it is today, meeting, good people like yourself, James. So it's it's been fun, and I'm sure that, the methods might change as we learn and grow, but a lot of it's come through personal relationships as well as that first line of social media interactions.
Well, the other thing that I appreciate about your guys' show too, especially the way that the episodes are structured, is it is extremely clear the value to the listener, that you go in, you present the value to the listener. Hey, this is worth your time. You execute very nicely. And then at the end, you button it all up really nicely with the takeaway. It's so solid, and it makes me want to just keep going. And Fitz, I think you were talking about, you get that feeling at the end of listening to a podcast, and you want to convey that, and you want to have that in your show as a gift kind of to your listener. You guys are very successful with that. With the episodes that I listened to, it was very satisfying on that level. Is there anything that you guys are doing now that you wished you were doing at the beginning of at the launch of your show?
Yeah, I think, and this is something I think anyone that's learning a new skill does, is just being even more open and willing to be vulnerable. I mean, we talk about that in the intro. That's been the whole theme of our growth and development, is how we could have leaned into that even quicker. But honestly, growth and change and everything I've learned with personal development, like, that is how the journey is supposed to go. Whatever time frame it happens in, that's how it's supposed to. But I think if there was any way for myself included just to like open up more and be more friendly and fun and not as nervous. But again, that's part of the growth that made that initial challenge for me very fulfilling to overcome. So I don't know if I would change it, but definitely that would be something that I would have loved to lean into a lot quicker.
Fitz, I'm going to throw this next question to you. What is it that you want people to get out of your show? Why should they listen to your podcast?
Absolutely. For me, we wanted to, if I ask a person, who was your best teacher, non-family related, it was just a teacher that actually believed in you, that you could actually do it on what you put your mind to it with your heart and soul. For me, personally, her name is Mrs. Vargas, all the way from kindergarten, because she's the one that convinced me you could do this, you could be in a Broadway play, go ahead, and she believed in me. If I could deliver the same value for others listening to our podcast, that I myself can do it too, then Sam and I have done our duty.
And James, if you don't mind, I'll expand a little bit on that too.
Please.
I think beyond just surface level motivation, that deeper inspiration is, especially as we bring in guests from various different industries, fields, backgrounds, and defining success however they have. I think we just really want people, in my mind, I want them to feel like they have the tools and the resources they need to live whatever successful life they envision for themselves, or to even work on discovering that, because some people haven't even figured out what that might look like for them in having a purpose of what they're doing. So that's really where I feel all of us as human beings, as we discover that. And one of the books that I'm reading currently, it talks about this, is that as we discover that purpose and fulfillment, it usually is the most fulfilling when it's involving helping and serving other human beings and people. And so if everyone can find some type of way that they're doing that in their lives, I really do think, as cliche as it sounds, we can make the world a better place, because everyone will genuinely be more happy.
All right. So this question I want both of you to answer, and Sam, we'll start with you this time. Let's get into a time machine and go a year or two down the road. What are your hopes for your podcast?
Wow, that's a great question. Fitz, we probably need to talk about this.
I have a little vision, but I mean, this is good that James is asking it, but go ahead.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So I would say, obviously, just continue the growth path that we're on. So, I don't know at what point it becomes exponential versus kind of the linear growth we're seeing, but I want to have a strong community around people that are actively expressing what they've learned either from us in the discussions we've had or the guests that we're having, and people building relationships with each other as a result of that. So whatever form that looks like, whether it's, again, who knows what the state of the world with COVID and everything will be in at that point. But, hopefully things are happening in person and we might be able to meet some of the people that are, actually learning and listening to us. I just see that sense of community really growing, where we've actually meeting people and like, hey, I was really inspired. I saw this change in my life because of episode whatever with whatever guest it was. And then they were able to improve their life because of it. That's just like my personal view of it. But now I'm curious, Mr. Fitz, the vision man, what he's got.
No, for me, I see it as a large community as big as it could be, with the same vision that we have, and acting as a servant leadership to the community, with us expanding our knowledge and bringing guests in, and also have the same vision with these people that we all work with, that could turn into whatever the case may be, a personal development or professional development when it comes to coaching in different organization. I think this partnership of Sam and I, we can't fake our camaraderie. Like, we're actually good friends outside of this podcast, So for us, it has a lot to do with that, because it's something that who wouldn't want to work with somebody that you enjoy working with, right? So we always think about that. And that's my vision, is that it's going to be as big community as it can be, with also people that we work with that has the same vision and mission. So,
well, Sam and Fitz, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you. Please tell us where people can learn more about both of you as well as your podcast.
Absolutely. Sam, did you want to start with that?
Yeah, I'll do the closer like I enjoy doing. So as far as social media, you can find us at enroute to success 365 on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, and Pinterest, and individually at Fitz DeSanto or Sam Boyer on LinkedIn. And then at our actual email for our podcast is alohafitzsam@gmail.com. And those are going to be the best places. We're very active on both Instagram and LinkedIn, and as well as the other platforms as we've interacted with you, James. And those are the best places to either support or interact and ask questions, build some relationships. And I see Fitz leaning in, so I'll let you share the rest.
No, I was just going to say, we're all on all the audio platforms. So Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, and we're also in YouTube as well. So if the best way to connect to those platforms is through our Instagram, because we do have a link there that connects you to all these other sound platforms. But thank you for noticing, Mr. Boyer.
Of course.
The name of the show is Enroute to Success. Fitz and Sam, thanks again for your time, your wisdom, and just your positivity. I wish you both the success in everything that you do, but especially for your show.
Thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure, James.
Yeah, thanks a lot, James. This has been a lot of fun. I hope it was as much fun for you as it was for me. Maybe I'm the only one having fun. I don't know, but
absolutely, it was a blast. Thanks again to Fitz and Sam. Check the show notes for links to learn more about Fitz and Sam and their show Enroute to Success. Please share what you got out of my conversation by leaving a review on podchaser.com. You can find out how to do this in the show notes. And do let me know what you need from me to make this show even better for you. Make sure you follow Podcast Tactics to keep learning more about podcasting in future episodes. Thank you.